By the end of this video, you're going to have a concrete, repeatable framework to decide exactly which lure to throw, when to change it, and when to walk away from a spot entirely. Most bank anglers believe that finding the best fishing lure is about matching a secret color or a specific swimming action that the fish are supposedly craving on any given day. But actual fisheries data on largemouth bass shows something completely different, and it is costing you fish on every single trip. The lure itself matters far less than the sequence of environmental variables you are presenting it in. We are going to replace the endless guesswork of your tackle box with a strict process of elimination based on water temperature, light penetration, and lateral line hydrodynamics. There is no magic bait in fishing, just a biological checklist that the bass is already using to decide whether to eat or ignore your presentation. Imagine two bank anglers standing on the exact same shoreline, looking at the exact same fallen tree extending into the water. The first angler opens his box, picks a lure that looks good to him, casts straight at the trunk, retrieves it 3 times, gets no bites, and decides the spot is completely dead. He is fishing on autopilot, relying entirely on the hope that his chosen lure will do all the heavy lifting and trigger a magical response. The second angler has not even unhooked his bait from the rod guide yet. He is looking at the angle of the sun, feeling the direction of the wind on his face, and reading the water clarity to determine exactly how far a bass can actually see right now. Research from the American Fisheries Society demonstrates that in stained or muddy water, a bass's visual strike zone shrinks to less than 20 inches. Because of this physical limitation, the fish is forced to rely heavily on its lateral line to detect low-frequency water displacement just to survive. The second angler knows that throwing a silent, natural-colored finesse bait into that specific water is mathematically doomed to fail, no matter how realistic the paint job looks. He is not guessing. He is applying a field framework. And this video is going to teach you exactly what that second angler sees before he ever makes his first cast. To stop guessing and start catching, you have to ask a specific sequence of questions at every single spot you walk up to. The first question in this framework is always, what is the primary sensory input in this exact water column right now? When you walk up to the bank, your first job is to dip the tip of your rod into the water and see how far down it remains visible. If you lose sight of the rod tip in less than a foot, vision is no longer the primary sense the bass is using to hunt. In highly turbid water, bass rely on a system of neuromasts along their lateral line that detect water displacement and pressure changes from struggling prey. If your lure does not move water violently, the fish literally does not know it is there. This is the exact scenario where heavy vibration lures like large spinnerbaits or wide wobbling crankbaits are not just an option, but a biological necessity. But what if you can see the rod tip clearly at 3 feet deep? That entirely changes the equation, but it introduces a new problem that most anglers ignore. In clear water, a bass's highly developed vision takes over, and they are notorious for inspecting a bait closely before committing to a strike. If you throw that same loud, aggressive spinnerbait into clear, calm water, the unnatural vibration and flash will actually trigger an avoidance response rather than a feeding response. You test this by tying on a highly natural, silent presentation and making a long cast parallel to the bank. If you get a follow but no strike, the fish is using its vision to inspect, meaning your profile is right, but your speed or color is slightly unnatural. Which leads directly to the second question you must ask. What is the water temperature trend doing to the fish's metabolism? You do not need an expensive marine thermometer. You just need to know if the water has been warming or cooling over the past 48 hours. Bass are poikilothermic, meaning their internal body temperature and metabolic rate are entirely dictated by the surrounding water. When a cold front drops the water temperature significantly, the digestive enzymes in a bass's stomach literally slow down. They do not need to eat as much, and they will not expend high amounts of energy to chase down a fast-moving meal. This is why throwing a fast, erratic topwater lure on a cold, post-frontal morning feels like fishing in a swimming pool. The framework dictates that in a cooling trend, your lure must have a tight action and be fished painfully slow, keeping it in the strike zone for as long as possible. You switch to a suspending jerkbait or a heavy jig dragged across the bottom, forcing the lure to remain vulnerable in front of the fish's face. But if the water has been steadily warming for 3 days, the metabolic switch flips. The bass are actively hunting, their digestion is rapid, and their willingness to chase a bait over long distances increases dramatically. This is when you deploy lures that cover water quickly to intersect with roaming fish. Yet, even if you perfectly match the water clarity and the temperature trend, you will still fail if you cannot answer the third question. What interrupts this water, and where is the actual ambush point? Bass do not just wander aimlessly. They orient to physical edges and structural interruptions in the environment. A fallen tree, a weed line, a depth drop-off, or even a hard shadow cast by a bridge pillar all serve the exact same biological purpose. They create a physical boundary that breaks up the current and provides a hidden vantage point to ambush passing bait fish. The beginner mistake is casting directly into the center of the visible structure, assuming the fish is buried deep inside. But a feeding bass does not bury itself. It positions itself on the outermost edge of the interruption, facing the direction of the incoming water or wind. Wind pushes microscopic plankton, which brings the bait fish, which dictates exactly where the bass will be waiting. You test this by identifying the windward side of the structure and bringing your lure exactly parallel to that specific edge. If the lure comes cleanly across that edge and you get no response, you do not just cast again to the same spot. You adjust the angle of your retrieve so the lure physically deflects off the structure itself. Deflection causes a momentary change in direction and speed, simulating a panicked baitfish and triggering an instinctual reaction strike that a straight retrieve simply cannot achieve. If you have dialed in the clarity, the temperature, and the ambush point, there is only one variable left to solve. What is the natural forage profile, and how does it dictate the lure's placement in the water column? Bass feed on 2 primary categories of prey: baitfish that swim horizontally in the middle to upper water column, and crustaceans that scurry along the bottom. If you're fishing a rocky bank with a lot of crevices, the dominant food source is likely crawfish. Throwing a lure that swims 3 feet above the rocks completely ignores the biological reality of that specific microenvironment. The fish are physically angled slightly downward, scanning the hard bottom for movement. Your framework dictates that you must use a lure that maintains constant, grinding contact with those rocks, dragging up sediment just like a real crawfish. Conversely, if you see small baitfish dimpling the surface in an open cove, a bottom-dragging lure is useless because the predators are looking up. Every single lure in your tackle box is just a tool designed to solve a specific combination of these exact variables. But here is the reality that completely changes how you will look at fishing from the bank. Everything covered so far: the water clarity, the metabolic temperature trend, the structural edges, and the forage profile, assumes that these factors act independently. The complete story is that none of these variables work alone, and a successful catch only happens when all of them tell the exact same story. You can have the perfect vibration for muddy water, but if you fish it too fast during a cold front, it fails. You can have the perfect bottom dragging profile, but if you drag it on the downwind side of the structure where no bait is being pushed, it fails. The secret to knowing when to use a lure is realizing that the lure is just the final answer to an equation the environment has already written. You are not trying to force the fish to like your bait. You're translating what the water, the wind, and the temperature are already demanding. If this is the kind of fishing content you want more of, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure it shows up. The next time you walk up to the bank, do not immediately reach for your favorite bait. Before your next cast, ask yourself what is interrupting this water, what direction the food is moving, and how far the fish can actually see.